The death of former President Jimmy Carter on December 29, 2024, has shocked many people. At the age of 100, Jimmy Carter passed away in Plains, Georgia after dealing with serious health problems. His death has caused sadness across the US and beyond. As some people remember his work, critics take a look back at controversies surrounding his government. As the nation mourns, plans for a memorial to Jimmy Carter are being made, as though his life was a perfect example of service and dedication. But as we remember him, perhaps we should take a more honest look at what his time as president truly meant. Yes, Carter worked for peace and fairness, but was he really the leader we needed? Or just a man with good ideas who couldn't follow through? His passing marks the end of a long life, but let's not forget that many of his policies didn't lead to real changes. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe as we take a closer look at Jimmy Carter's life, his work, and the controversies that followed him during his time in office. Jimmy Carter was born on October 1st, 1924 in Plains, Georgia, in a farming family. His father, James Earl Carter Sr., not James Earl Jones, like I may or may not have made the mistake of on the first take of this, ran a peanut farm and small business, and his mother, Lillian, worked as a nurse. Growing up in a small town, Jimmy learned the value of hard work and helping others. His parents believed in education, and his mother taught him to read before he started school. His early learning sparked his interest in reading and learning more. Jimmy Carter went to Plains High School, where he did well in his studies, especially in history and science. Later, he went to Georgia Southwestern College before transferring to the U.S. Naval Academy in 1943. At the academy, he excelled in both studies and leadership, graduating in 1946 with a degree in science, which led to his career in the Navy. Carter won the U.S. presidential election and became president on January 20th, 1977. Jimmy Carter's presidency is a topic that brings mixed opinions, with some Americans remembering his time in office as successful and others seeing it as, well, awful. Carter became president in 1977, after a time when the country was shaken by the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. He was known for being an honest man with strong moral beliefs, and many people believed he could help restore trust in the government. He promised to bring a new direction to the country by focusing on fairness and human rights. But his time in office was marked by challenges that led to a divided opinion about his leadership. When people talk about Jimmy Carter's presidency, his foreign policy is usually the first thing that comes up. Back when he took office, the Cold War was still in full swing, and the US was locked in a tense standoff with the Soviet Union. Carter really focused on human rights, pushing other countries to treat their people better. One of his big wins in foreign policy was the Camp David Accords, where he helped broker a peace deal between Egypt and Israel. That was seen as a huge success, and Carter got a lot of praise for it. But not everything in his foreign policy went smoothly. Some of his decisions sparked criticism. One of the biggest blows in Carter's presidency came with the Iranian Revolution in 1979. The US had been backing the Shah of Iran, who got overthrown by revolutionaries. The new government, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, was firmly against the US, which made things even worse. Then, a group of militants stormed the US embassy in Tehran and took 52 American hostages. The hostage crisis dragged on for more than a year, and Carter struggled to get the hostages back home. His inability to resolve the situation hurt his reputation, and a lot of Americans started doubting his leadership. A failed rescue attempt made things even worse. As the hostages stayed in captivity, Carter's approval ratings plummeted, and he had a hard time getting the public's trust back. Carter's handling of the economy became a big problem during his time in office. The country was hit with high inflation, rising unemployment, and slow growth, which people started calling stagflation. Carter tried to fix it by trying to control wages and prices, but those moves didn't work out like he hoped. The economy stayed in bad shape throughout his presidency, and a lot of people felt like Carter wasn't doing enough to help them. When he left office, inflation and unemployment were still high, and that hurt his standing with the American public. The energy crisis of the 1970s made things even worse for Carter. Gas prices were climbing, and there were oil shortages everywhere. Carter made it a top priority to cut down on the country's reliance on foreign oil and push for renewable energy. But his plans ran into a lot of resistance from oil companies and other groups with power. As the crisis dragged on, many Americans were fed up with the high cost of energy, and Carter's attempts to fix it didn't seem to make things better right away. Then, the Iranian Revolution made things even harder, because it messed up oil production, and Carter's energy policies didn't end the crisis. Another thing people remember about Carter's presidency was his leadership style. While some say he was really careful and thoughtful when making decisions, some folks respected his attention to detail, but others thought he was too slow and careful. He didn't rush into decisions and liked to take his time to look at everything. His reluctance to act fast or take risks made some people think he didn't have the toughness needed to lead the country through tough times. Also, Carter's strong moral values sometimes made him seem out of touch with the rough and tumble of Washington politics. He didn't like playing the usual political games that were common in Congress, and that pushed some of his own party members away. Carter's focus on human rights was something people either loved or hated. A lot of people respected his commitment to fairness and justice, but others thought he was wasting time on something that wasn't realistic. His attempts to reform healthcare and welfare programs were blocked by Congress, and his efforts to fight poverty didn't really get anywhere. Some of his policies were just too complicated for the average person to follow, and his inability to make progress in these areas left a lot of people frustrated. Even though his goals were good, the public started to wonder if he was actually getting anything done to fix the country's problems. As the 1980 election got closer, Carter's popularity kept dropping. A lot of Americans felt like he hadn't done what they expected of him. The problems he faced just kept getting worse, and there wasn't much sign of things getting better. Ronald Reagan, the former governor of California, came up as his biggest challenger. Reagan promised a stronger military, lower taxes, and a return to traditional values, which really clicked with a lot of voters. Carter ended up losing the election by a big margin. After he left office, Carter shifted his focus to humanitarian work. In 1982, he started the Carter Center, an organization aimed to promoting peace, fighting disease, and improving human rights all over the world. His efforts earned him a lot of respect, and in 2002, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Even with his success after being president, his time in office is still seen as controversial. People remember his presidency for both his work on human rights and fairness, and his struggles with big issues like the economy, foreign relations, and energy problems. Well, after a successful life lived, Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, passed away on December 29, 2024, at the age of 100. He died at his home in Plains, Georgia, around 3:45 p.m. Eastern, according to his son, James E. Carter III. Carter's death has led to tributes from leaders across the country, including President Joe Biden. Biden remembered Carter as a leader who cared deeply for people. His funeral will take place over several days, ending with a service at the Washington National Cathedral, January 9, 2025, which President Biden has named a national day of mourning. Before the service, Carter's body will be at the Carter Center in Atlanta. This is to honor the work Carter and his wife Rosalind did for different causes after his presidency. Carter will be buried in Plains, Georgia, next to Rosalind. Family members, including President Biden, are expected to attend and share their respects. The funeral will be broadcasted, but the details are still being worked out. Carter was just another example of a great leader with lots of controversies that rose to fame. But we all know that all heroes fall at some point. His legacy lives on.